that is your receptor part of it, right? Your somatic, sensory, nerve fiber, in this case, the somatic or visceral ones, picking up information, bringing it into the body. Again, there's an integrative center over here that might do something, and then we're going to go back and eventually have some kind of effect by making some kind of movement, right? So this will be part of your motor or efferent division, which will consist of motor nerve fibers coming out of the spinal cord and then innervating skeletal muscle. We've already learned about this, right? Those motor neurons with their motor units innervating the skeletal muscle fibers, right? And so if you want to consciously walk over, pick up your pen, start writing, you want to pick up a glass, start drinking, you can do that or not do it. Right? You're going to do this based on whether you want to do it or not. So this is a voluntary function over here. And it's all going to be done through skeletal muscles, the things that move your limbs, your biceps brachii, your rectus femoris, your pectoralis major. So that is your somatic nervous system, stuff that we're voluntarily in control of, right? And it's to do with skeletal muscle. So that's part of your motor division. So here is your motor neuron, goes out, innervates your motor unit, whatever this is, right? And it's all voluntary because this is going to be controlled by your upper brain right there, what it's supposed to do. There's also reflexive stuff going on, but ultimately we can control what's going on here. So your skeletal muscle is a so-called effector, right? That is, it's in one of the classes, 3 classes or a couple classes of effectors, right? That we want to know about. And this is a somatic, part of the somatic nervous system, right? The skeletal muscle. So these skeletal muscles over here, they're controlled by those motor neurons, right? Controlling a motor neuron, but those motor neurons are controlled by neurons way up here in your brain, like the highest centers of your brain, right? That are going to be able to do this voluntarily, right? In very coordinated fashion right here, right? So this is your higher brain. This is your, something maybe a lizard or something couldn't really do, or maybe it could, I don't know. But in any case, wow. Right, so that your somatic nervous system, skeletal muscle. The other part of your nervous system, again, is your autonomic nervous system, which we'll have a whole lecture on, but real briefly, this could also be referred to as your visceral motor. This is going to be involuntary. This output is going to be done to things like your cardiac tissue, right? Your cardiac muscle tissue, your smooth muscle tissue lining all your organs like your bladder. Right? All these are going to be unconsciously controlled. You cannot make your heart beat faster or slower based purely on will. Right? You can do it by like thinking scary things, make your heart beat faster, but that's an indirect effect. Right? This is all going to be unconscious and you're not able to control these kind of things directly. And then within the autonomic, we're going to split into your sympathetic and parasympathetic. Don't worry about that yet. But in any case, that whole process, right? Cardiac muscle, smooth muscle that's lining your gut tube, your blood vessels and stuff like that, salivary glands, all that stuff to make you secrete more stuff, or digestive glands, also adipose tissue to maybe break down more glucose or something. All this stuff you can't control. It's controlled in your hypothalamus and brainstem over here, right? That's going to be your lower brain over here, right? Stuff that you're not aware of doing. It's doing it all for you because you got busier things to do. So visceral, right? Inside all this internal gut stuff. So make sure you understand what that means. Visceral motor. These would be the visceral effectors, right? So between somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system, skeletal muscle is your neuroeffector for that. And then for your autonomic nervous system, it'll be things like smooth muscle, glands, cardiac muscle, stuff like that. So those are the receptors and the effectors over here, right? And so here is we kind of talked about these spindle fibers over here that could detect stretch stuff. So that's embedded in your muscle over there. And when someone taps you in the knee right there, that causes a little stretch. So that's picked up by this sensory neuron over here, brought into the central nervous system. You know, you could think how fast this happens, right? When you hit a knee, it seems like it must be happening locally, but actually it goes all the way up to your spinal cord, goes in there, and then talks to a so-called motor neuron, which is going to, you know, cause this to contract, so your leg kicks up like that. This reaction is very, you know, it's very fast, right? There's a single motor neuron is talking to this sensory neuron over here. And there's only one so-called synapse. The other thing I'm going to tell you about the nervous system is that I can't talk about one thing without bringing up 5 other things. So we'll talk about sensory neurons, motor neurons, synapses, and all that stuff as we move along there, but you may have an idea already from like neuromuscular junction stuff. But in any case, the faster you can do, like the less, this is only one synapse. This is called a monosynaptic reflex. Very fast because you're talking to minimal amount. You have a sensory neuron, it can't make the contraction. It's got to talk to one, but it's got to talk to a motor neuron. But the motor neuron's up in the spinal cord, so it's got to bring the information to him and then tell him, right? So that whole thing takes like, you know, a millisecond, however long it takes you to kick your knee out. Very fast signal. And there's not really too much delay right there, right? Not much integration. This is what you call the simplest reflex, right? Another simple reflex, but slightly more complicated, might be something like this. You have some kind of pain reaction. You touch a hot stove or something sharp. Now your pain receptors kick off this sensory neuron. Travels in again, goes in, but instead of talking to the motor neuron directly, it first relays this information to another cell in the middle right here called an interneuron. That interneuron in turn passes that information on. So why would it do this? Why not? It's much slower. You've slowed down. Now you have another synapse to go. And as we'll see, there's quite a delay right here. This is going to be, very, very fast electrical signal. And then it's got to go through this chemical signal like at the neuromuscular junction. Then it's going to be an electrical signal. Then it's going to go to another electrical signal. So why would you go through this extra step, right? It's going to take you longer to move your hand up, right? So the truth is, it's pretty fast by itself, but we want to do something more than just lift our hand up. We want to put that in context, and we want to maybe tell other parts of your body what's going on with that pain right there, so that you can move your whole body and do things as an integrated whole. Right? So this neuron, this picture right here, wouldn't really be too reflective. But the bottom line is we're getting sensory information. And it's usually going into your central nervous system. And that information is going to be integrated with all sorts of other information before it passes it on out to the motor, right? So this simple picture is not really telling you what this integration part is about. It's just telling you where it's happening. So here's a little something, a little bit starting to get a little more complicated, right? You got a stimulus, sensory information is coming in, going into the spinal cord, talking to this interneuron. And you'll notice right up here, this neuron, he's talking to him, information's being passed, but it's also branching off and say, this guy just, stepped on a tack or whatever. And not only do you want to move your hand away, but you want to tell your brain about it. Right? You want to pass that information on. So that's going to split off and pass it on to other neurons. This interneuron might also be influenced by other stuff, right, going on here, right, that may influence whether it actually fires or not, right? So in this way, you could actually integrate other information that's also happening in the body before you just do this reflex. This could happen at the spinal cord. It doesn't have to go up to the brain, this sort of integration of information. It could also, this split on and talk to other people along the way, split that pathway, will give your whole body, give your brain like the whole information in the body before it does any one thing, if it needs to. Right? So this is what you call integration, right? So again, that's a very simple picture, even one. Here's a single motor neuron, right? This is the cell body over here, and the so-called dendrites where it's picking up information in purple. And then all these little blue things here are other neurons, right? Other neurons coming in from all over the place. And what they're trying to do is influence this guy, basically, right? It wants to say, fire. This one wants to say, you know, I want you to pass on this message. This one over here might say, no, don't pass on this message, right? So there's all sorts of, all these neurons are talking to this guy a little bit, right? And then all of a sudden this guy and this guy might come in really heavy and start putting a lot of signals, right? So this neuron over here is going to take the sum total of all the information it gets before it passes that information, right? That's going to be kind of the integration function of the nervous system, right? That it could take multiple sources and then before it passes that information on. And we'll learn about what all these words mean a little bit. So here's the simple version. Now you have a neuron that, let's say this is the neuron that makes you go eat a late night ice cream, right? And it wants to, it really wants, that's going to set off that whole program that makes you go get your Ben and Jerry's, right? You have a neuron here that is detecting blood sugar levels, and maybe it's low, or maybe it's like really tired. It says, yes, 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 go. Then you have your willpower neuron over here. This is all made up, by the way. Over here saying, no, 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 no. Here's a memory neuron over here saying, oh, last time you did that, you regretted it. Here's another one of your id saying, no, no, this will feel really good, do it, right? So it's going to, based on all the information in your memory or what else is going on at the time, to influence whether this guy's fire, right? And what this is all the function of that type of neuron we're going to call interneuron, right? That's kind of an example of this integrative function. So let's talk about those neurons and stuff like that.